was a chicken down in the basement going, how y'all are.
Yeah, that's what. When you made a motion the other night, Monty had been trying to get an extension for it. I mean, George didn't see it. Really? And then you made the opposite motion of what he wanted to do. Monty voted to vote for High Springs, and he was trying to get George's attention, and George didn't see it.
That might have been intentional.
Long weekend though.
It turned the whole night around. May not have changed the outcome, but it turned the whole night
Don't
around.
we have football tomorrow night, right? Football tomorrow night. Anybody know who's playing?
Ohio State.
Indiana.
Hey Jordan, you keep coming here every night this week. Let's go on over.
This is I like it here.
You did a good job.
And he's calling me at 6:30, and I'm still snoring.
Hey, I think I waited till 7. I think
I'm yelling at the dog.
Is this one mine?
That's your
I thought the same thing when he called me. I was like,
Oh, to be young and energetic.
Hey, we got lots of fun things to talk about. We got to get.
Let everybody know.
publicly, yeah.
Before you get out of here,
Yeah.
got some maps to show you tonight.
All right, I got it.
If it's before midnight or after
Okay.
midnight, we'll get
Keep
it.
it under 11.
Hey, now.
We're not gonna go past 11.
No.
3 hour house.
Now we've scheduled the meeting to look at the rules of procedure in planning and zoning, right? 5 minutes and 3 minutes, 10:30 cutoff time. You know, I was looking at poor Juan.
Rob's about to break his neck back there.
Yeah, Wanda was.
I've got to check.
I felt so bad for her.
Quasi-judicial, is it a quasi-judicial thing or a planning and zoning thing? Because if it's
Scott said it was a
quasi-judicial,
planning and zoning thing, that planning and zoning doesn't have a cutoff time. Because I told him when we were getting at 10:20, I said, hey, let's extend it for 15 minutes to show we're willing to stay here, but nobody's really saying much new here, so we need to get to them. And he's like, oh no, there's no time limit on planning and zoning meetings. And I looked at him, I thought he was joking, you know.
We're headed to uncharted
But
territory.
it might be quasi-judicial.
we may be doing 5 minutes
But we,
at the two public hearings.
to keep the consistency.
If that's in the rules of quasi-judicial, I don't think we can change them before.
Oh,
Yeah,
my
well,
The
but
opposing
it
side,
doesn't have to be,
the losing side would not.
yeah, it doesn't have to be before that one, but it needs to be
Short
before.
of the future.
Very next.
Yes, yeah.
I agree.
I think that was a record last night, 1 o'clock in the morning for planning and zoning.
That happened, I know it.
Well, you get 5 minutes for a comment.
There was at
And
least.
and the line was almost to the door, you know, and nobody was being concise. Everybody was taking their full 5 minutes.
Nor was anybody entering.
There was no compelling.
Substantial
Yeah, there was no
evidence.
compelling.
After the staff report, it was all
It was all
what I want.
what I want, this is what I'm afraid of, you know, and I, at some point, I think it was around 11:30, I asked, I said, people, if you're just against it, you know, in the essence of time.
Your shirt says it
you're
all.
against it.
Your
Yeah.
shirt says it all.
Just tells you, but you don't need to.
I was looking at those poor guys standing along the wall.
I wanted to jump up and punch the
Young
TV
people.
when the guy goes, can you start the timer over?
What?
So,
I think everybody wanted to do that. Yeah.
Are you serious?
I said, Eric,
Start the timer over?
man, 30 seconds.
You got 5 minutes. You lost 5 seconds.
Lonnie is going to be late, so we need to go ahead and get started without him.
is Rick coming?
And Rick is coming. He didn't tell me he was going to be late. He sent me a text real quick. And I have.
I have to confess something. At 5:30, I was about to go home, and I got a text from a friend of mine. She said, how long is that budget hearing tonight? I'm like, oh, God.
We're on the downslide of Sweep Sweep for the city of Newberry.
Sweet what?
Sweep Sweep. This is.
Actually, I wanted to ask you, are you guys considering a lunch card of any kind for showing up at commission meetings?
You get a free
Frozen
pass.
berry.
Especially during the board meeting.
Hey, come to three meetings. The 4th one's free.
That's awesome. Glad to hear that.
Jordan over there just trying to give my stuff away for free.
That's a good point. That's a good point.
I want to know where that camp man is.
guys. Hey, Monty. Monty, we expected you to be late. Can you go back to the store and get candy?
Train.
Train coming?
That has nothing to do with candy.
We're gonna bring in an ordinance that says no trains in business hours.
Yeah, somebody from the city needs to get on that train.
It's the same
We
city
got a bridge
official
to the-
that ended the bus.
Ready to roll?
Good evening.
Oh, hey, Judy.
Good evening, folks. We'll call this City of Newberry Budget Workshop to order, and we will immediately hand it over to the manager to lead us off.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good evening. This is our fourth budget workshop. We are going to briefly go through the presentation. I guess I'll tell you to begin with, we have 4 documents on the dais for you. First is a copy of the presentation, the 60-slide presentation that Dallas put together in 10-point pitch to get it all on a slide. We have a copy of the budget, rolled up budget. We have, that's item number 2. Is theirs number? Okay, number 2 is rolled up budget. Number 3 is the list. This is the list of all the things that are beyond the continuing budget, the basic budget that we kind of went through to see when we set a millage rate, how much funding is available, and then we fund them or not fund them. We've taken a crack at it. We've got a balanced budget tonight. And this list shows you what's in and what's out. Certainly, if the commission would like to change what's in and what's out, we'll do that on the fly. We can hook up our computer and we can see those types of things. Then the last thing is the 5-year CIP. This is across all funds. We talk about it a lot, but we probably only print it and provide it to you during budget season. Here's our 5-year CIP. It's a flexible document, changes throughout the year, but especially during budget season. But it kind of shows you a 5-year window of what we're trying to accomplish. Also, the list is primarily the current year's CIP. We just pull those projects in, and it also includes things that are not capital projects. It includes special extraordinary projects that may be classified as O&M, but they're not our ordinary business, and so we show it on the list and then we fund it or not. So after explaining the documents you have in front of you, we will jump into the presentation. A lot of it is redundant. This is our fourth workshop. You've seen the majority of this. This is kind of a summary compilation of it all. So we'll be moving at a pretty brisk pace. Feel free to stop us if you have questions.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and City Commissioners. As always, we'll just start with the timeline. The next 2 items on the City Commission's timeline in terms of budget are the budget hearings, which will be the first and second meetings in September, at which point we will also advertise our trim, and then in about a month the new budget begins. So starting with just an overview of the citywide budget, the total budget comes in at about $13.3 million in revenues. This gives you a breakdown of where the revenues come from. Primarily citywide, most of the revenues come from charges for services. That's mostly your utilities, your water, wastewater, and electric utilities. And then your second largest income source is your property taxes. On the expense side, we have about $13.1 million scheduled in expenses this year. Again, the largest portion of your citywide expenses go to your physical environment, which is your utilities, solid waste, those items. And then the second largest expense for the city is the public safety, which includes your fire department, your law enforcement, code enforcement, and your building departments.
13 million.
13.1. In your governmental funds,
Should have asked that earlier.
this is your governmental funds, so basically just excluding the utilities and internal service funds. About 50% of your revenues into your governmental functions comes from taxes of some sort. Again, the largest portion being your property taxes, and the second largest being other taxes, which includes the wild spaces, funds, half-cent sales tax, gas taxes, those communication service taxes, those sorts of items. And then following that is your charges for services, which would include solid waste and recreation fees and those sorts of things. On the expense side, in your governmental funds, by and large, the majority of your funds, by a good amount, go towards public safety again. The second largest is culture and recreation. The culture and recreation is a little bit inflated this year due to that Wild Spaces and also due to us receiving the Wild Spaces grant from the county. So it's about $800,000 from Wild Spaces and from that grant, which increases the culture and recreation by about 10%. So the city will receive about $330,000 in direct Wild Spaces taxes next year, and then we have a $400,000 grant. And then we're spending $800,000 using some of the fund balance this year for those multi-purpose fields. Correct. All right.
So, Dallas lets me have the slide that talks about all the great things that that we've done at your direction, either in this past year or at least in recent history. First and foremost is we've built our general fund revenues to $658,000. That was reserves to $658,000, and that was at the end of last fiscal year. We anticipate that it'll increase by more than $100,000 this year. You'll remember that our goal is somewhere north of 1.2 million to have 2 to 3 months of reserve. I guess I'm always shooting for 2.5 months of operating revenues or operating expenses in emergency reserves, and so we're making healthy strides to get there and feel very good about that. We always seek to diversify our revenue streams, and so recently we've developed electric franchise fees, we've developed mosquito control fees. We expect that somewhere towards the end of next fiscal year we'll begin receiving natural gas franchise fees. Really depends on how fast some development goes, so we haven't loaded that into the budget. If we begin to realize that, we'll do a budget adjustment. We've increased funding significantly for both for public safety, both in fire and police, and we've continued with great water, wastewater rates. They're equitable, they're fair to the users. We maintain competitive electric rates, and we saved, and this year you saved our residents $120,000 annually by the execution of a 7-year solid waste services contract.
Some of the assumptions and factors that staff used when preparing the budget are as follows. We assumed a millage rate of 5.9999.
Sub 6.
Sub 6.
Man, you guys are math wizards.
So it is a little bit above what we have this year, but it is keeping below the 6, which we understood was important to the commission. We did have the $25 increase in fire assessment for the expansion of the fire station for the debt service related to that expansion. The budget includes an up to 4% merit increase for city staff. It includes continued funding for the vehicle replacement program. This year, we are establishing a new internal service fund for the vehicles and heavy equipment. Essentially what we're going to do is establish a fund that will house and purchase all of our large capital equipment, and then it'll lease it back to the city. The goal of that fund is that it will help levelize some of the expenses so we don't have these spikes. A couple of years ago, the commission wanted to put $40,000 aside for vehicle replacement, so we're going to transfer that into that fund as some seed money to start that process. And then hopefully going forward, we'll have a set-aside dedicated funding source for large equipment and vehicles going forward. We do have some increased funding for renewal and replacement of existing infrastructure. Not much, but it is at least at the same level as it was in the fiscal year 2017 budget. We did not assume any new revenue streams in terms of municipal services, tax on water, or any types of assessments, as we did not receive that direction. There is the possibility that in the year we will receive natural gas franchise fees. However, because at this point we're unsure of what those revenues might be or when they might occur, we didn't assume that we would receive those. And if we do, when we do, we'll come to you with a budget amendment to recognize those revenues.
Commissioner McGee?
Question. The vehicle and heavy equipment replacement fund, would the Quint fall into that, or is that separate?
Yes.
It would fall into it
Mr.
if we
Mayor.
had it in existence, or will it fall into it now? Will it
It
be
will-
funded out of that fund now?
Our plan is going forward, everything will be funded out of that fund.
Okay.
So the tanker that we bought last year, which we were paying ourselves back for, we're transitioning into making lease payments on that into the fund. So Ben and his command vehicle are now paying into the fund, so there'll be money there. Come 2019, I believe, is when the Quint's scheduled to be replaced. There probably won't be enough money there, but there'll be more money there than there currently, is. So it'll definitely take a while for it to completely be self-funding, but it starts us off in a positive direction.
I just would offer, it's kind of a Dallas thing, and I know the commission has expressed interest. I think it's a great thing to have. It's not something that's typical of cities our size or even cities much better than us. I'd say that there are cities immediately to our north, both High Springs and Alachua, that wouldn't even consider something like that. So,
There
hats
are
off to
no
Dallas.
cities better than the city of Newberry.
That's what I was gonna say.
Mr. Manager, just to clarify that
Yeah.
rhetoric, there might be bigger cities, but
That's-
yeah.
What's Quinn?
Oh, what is Quinn? Can you explain that to the audience? That vehicle.
Quinn is one of our fire apparatuses. It's kind of a combination, jack of all trades, that hence the name Quinn. It performs 5 functions. It's pumper, it's an engine truck, it's a ladder truck, and the last 2 escape me, but
And how old is the vehicle that we currently have right now?
95.
oh, do we have someone from fire department in the room? Tell me, Ben, what are the 5, sir?
It's
Aerial rescue,
aerial elevated water stream. The last two.
aerial elevated water stream. What's the age of the current vehicle that we use?
99, it's almost 20 years old.
Almost 20 years old, from 1999. And what is the projected cost of replacing that vehicle in 2018 or 19 is when we're going to start?
I don't have a copy of the CIP.
Are we jumping ahead of you to get to that?
No.
While we're talking about it, we'll go ahead and let folks know. We do have some significant costs in
230?
fire coming up.
It's the 230.
230,000.
The next fire apparatus is the engine, which is 388, and that's scheduled to start in 19.
The Quint is not 230.
It just may be on the.
It must go past 5 years.
So the fire engine is up next at approximately $380,000. The Quint is after that
Quint's
at
460.
Quint's
$460,000.
we just see half of it in the 5-year outlook.
Okay, so we're just trying to spread that cost out. So just let folks know in our emergency fire service, we have some. This year we're doing the remodel, and we've done the water truck. The fire engine and the Quinn are up next,
And we did the command vehicle.
and we did the command vehicle.
as well.
Air packs.
Air packs. It's
90
been
grand.
really aggressive.
We have
Trying
been
to
and
catch up on the fire department.
this
last 3
commission has shown recently and in the past a desire to make sure that all of our emergency personnel are well funded.
Well, speaking of, the last assumption we made was to fund. an
Commissioner
increased
Farnsworth,
funding
did you have a question, or?
Yeah, I do have, so after those items were funded, are there any more major outlays in, let's say, the next 10, 15 years
in the fire department,
Yeah.
or
in the fire department?
We'll be back to the next one would be the brush truck. We have 4 pieces of apparatus. I believe the least expensive of them is the brush truck, and that's the last one that'll be replaced. But then moving forward, trying to space them out so that we don't end up having to replace 3 in 3 years, that we try to have even spacing between the replacement of those. What makes that difficult is they all have kind of different lives. That the engine, our main engine, puts the most miles, gets the most wear and tear, and it's your first call piece of apparatus, and so it gets replaced a little bit quicker than, say, a Quint or the tanker truck. But generally, we're trying to space them out, maybe one every 3 to 4 to 5 years.
And then the projected cost, are you including any kind of revenue from the sale of the vehicle, the current vehicle that we have, or is that part of the consideration?
Mr. Mayor, the formula we use considers the life of the vehicle, any salvage that the vehicle might get. It also includes an inflation rate to account for the future cost of the vehicle.
And aren't there state statutes that mandate that any public vehicle has to be auctioned off? Or it has to go to we can't just sell to a private.
Competitive.
It has to be
through a competitive process.
Okay.
But
Just for any asset the city owns.
And typically for budgeting purposes, we're not necessarily thinking about trade-in value, but when we get to the actual year of and we begin to refine it, that's always a consideration in terms of what the value that we can get out of the vehicle, or if we're going to try to attempt to trade it in. I think we traded in an electric truck this year and got 25 or 30,000 down out of it, and it helped us with the funding of the vehicle, which cost somewhere north of $230,000.
So the impact on residents with the millage rate and some of the other increases and reductions, the average home in Newberry is valued at around $160,000. You less off the $50,000 homestead exemption, gives you a tax value of about $110,000. Every home in Newberry will receive that $25 increase in the fire assessment. There's also the $60 reduction in solid waste if you're using solid waste. And then with the increased millage of 0.091 mils, that's about a $10 a year increase. So the total impact to city residents should be a reduction of about $25 a year. Not including the solid waste fee reduction, it's about $35 increase a year for the fire assessment and the millage. And then this isn't the city, but the county has reduced or is planning to reduce their general fund millage, which all residents of the county pay. They're reducing theirs by about 0.46 mils, which to the average resident of Newberry is about $50. So with all those combined, all other things being equal, including the value of your home, most residents should see a slight decrease, again, excluding any increases to the value of your home in terms of taxable value. This just gives you an overview of the general fund. We do have revenues and surplus over expenses. There are no increases in staffing in terms of new positions. There's actually a reduction of 2 FTEs in the general fund. There is a merit increase budgeted for up to 4%. We do propose, to offset those reductions in FTEs, a new inmate work squad in the recreation department to help increase the service levels of parks maintenance. And then we do have included CIP funding, the full CIP funding in the general fund.
Can staff tell the commission where those positions are being cut from?
Yes, sir. The both positions are being eliminated in recreation. We're eliminating one maintenance staff, and that is where the inmate work squad is plugging in. It's a more efficient expenditure of water. We calculate that the inmate work squad, there's 10 of them, but it equates to about seven FTEs, and it costs us about 1.5 FTEs. So we think we get great value out of that. We're seeing that in public works. The second is in recreation programming. We just had an opportunity. We had to downsize the staff. We had someone leave, and just hearing feedback from the community and the commission about their desire to see us be less staffed lower staffing rate in the programming side, and that we should fill in the gaps with volunteers, services, folks that want to get engaged in recreation. So
Parents.
So we're going to proceed with that. From the city's perspective, if you're just looking at employees, there will be a decreased level of service. We are stretched thin in that area, and the only way we're going to maintain our current level of service is through parent volunteers.
Commissioner McGehee.
Yeah, so, just so everyone knows, I mean, we had a lot of people that came up here and wanted to see that reduction. So I'm hoping that those people that wanted to see that reduction are going to be able to step up and kind of fill those shoes, because, once we take this step, it's not like we can halfway through the year say, well, I guess we made a mistake. So I just wanted to go on record and say that I really hope that these people step up and help us out with this, because this I know I got a lot of feedback from people saying, why can't it be like the old days when we had parents getting more involved. So I really hope people step up, and we're setting the table for you. So
I share that hope, and I share that concern, and I think our part of that is making sure that we communicate to the parents that this change is in response to their request, and there is a tit for tat here, that this is this relationship you said you wanted, and this is what we're doing, and this is your part of that. Commissioner Farnsworth.
Can you tell me how much the 0.091 mils generates in total revenue?
I can in just 1 second.
While we're nope, go ahead. I was filling in it.
Mr. Mayor, the 0.091 mils generates about $34,000 in additional revenue.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Now I lost my PowerPoint. All right, so moving on from the general fund, in our special revenue funds, Diamond Sports Park, there's not a lot of changes there. Diamond Sports Park is projected to, again, make revenues over expenditures. In your Champions Park fund, the largest change there is we're no longer receiving the bed tax funding from the county, as we've paid off that bond, so the Champions Park budget had decreased by $1.5 million. We are anticipating some rental fees, and then to expend, we still have $75,000 of the refunding revenues left to spend on capital outlay, and we're budgeting to spend that next year. In your Wild Spaces Surtax fund, as I mentioned earlier, we're projected to receive $330,000 in Wild Spaces funds. This is higher than what the county had estimated. We're anticipating over the course of the fund to receive a couple $100,000 more than previously estimated by the county. And then we're receiving the capital grant from the county to match our funding. So we'll be spending $800,000 on multi-purpose fields at Easton, using some of the funding we received this year to cover that deficiency of revenues.
Just out of curiosity, that's a reimbursement grant, correct?
Yes.
We spend the money, we provide them invoices, they reimburse us.
Commissioner Martin.
The money for the corner piece that we just bought came out of Wild Spaces money?
Yes, sir.
It's also part of that grant. The county indicated that they would go 50-50 on that project, and so we'll invoice them as soon as all those agreements, the dust settles on those agreements. We're still getting them executed.
In your debt service fund, we're transferring in funds from the general fund and making a debt service payment, and that is the debt service related to the fire station. In your capital improvement fund, we are continuing to build the fire station. Moving on to your enterprise funds.
Do you want to stop and take any questions on?
Sure, I would love to stop and take any questions on governmental funds.
Commission have any questions?
Moving along to enterprise funds. The assumptions and factors.
I'm sorry, does the audience have any questions? Oh, I hear none. Go right ahead.
The assumptions and important factors related to your enterprise funds were that we anticipate a 1.5% electric load growth as well as a 1.5% water and wastewater consumption, increase in water and wastewater consumption. Again, the 4%, up to 4% increase for staff. Our water and wastewater rates, as always, were set to generate close to sufficient revenues to meet operating expenses, while remaining the lowest wastewater and second lowest water rates for average users in our area. We do propose an increase to the water and wastewater rates of 1.5%. The notices of that increase will be mailed this week in the utility bills, and those will be ordinances in the budget hearing. For the 8th year in a row, we do not propose to change the electric rates. So I just want to say that again. For 8 years in a row, we've not increased our electric rates in the city of Newberry. We continue to charge a 3.5% fee to all of our enterprise funds, as well as Diamond Sports Park and special revenue funds for administrative services related to those funds to the general fund. We maintain a limited focus on our infrastructure through capital investments, but there is a sufficient, I believe, investment. We're putting some good money into the utilities, but we're not going crazy. And then the electric budget, we continue to have the 5% general fund transfer, which I believe is the 3rd or 4th year we've maintained the 5%.
Mr. Martin?
The very first 2 bullet points, the 1.5 changes on electric and change of water, wastewater, sorry. Where were you kind of pulling that number from?
We have a pretty extensive rate model we use where we take the consumption use out of our billing system for the last 12 months, comparing it to previous 12 months, and we do load forecasts based upon that. In the electric side, we receive help from FMPA on our load growth. I would say in both the electric and the water wastewater, our growth the last couple years has been larger than the 1.5, but we definitely want to err on the side of caution. I believe we've had a 4% customer, 4% increase in customers alone in the water wastewater side. So,
Those trends, I mean, we actually have trends. We all know that more people are moving to Newberry, and that definitely increases your load. However, all of our customers collectively are conserving better than they ever had, and that tends to work against it. So normally, if we're just seeing like a 3% growth rate in customers, we would expect a 3% growth rate in consumption, but the conservation element keeps it, and the fact that we want to be conservative and not overestimate our revenues leads us to use 1.5% as our growth factor.
Your electric utility, we're budgeting $4.3 million in revenues and close to $4.4 million in expenses for revenues under expenses of $41,000. This doesn't include your non-operating revenues, so we will anticipate some non-operating revenues or delinquent fees and interest, which will buy down that loss by about another $22,000. So we are anticipating not collecting enough to meet our expenses this year, but we do have a surplus of revenue of reserves built in the electric fund that we can eat into for a few years while we ride out some high bulk power costs, and then hopefully in a few years when the bulk power costs go down, we can return to building our reserves.
Do you believe the costs are going to go down? Maybe working on it, but will it?
Actually, yes, the costs are going to go down, and the reason is the wholesale power costs are going to decrease. Actually, you may not have had a chance to read Bill's report from last month. FMPA was the low bid, brought Bartow on. They're a pretty big customer, and so this excess capacity that we're really just making payments on, debt service payments on, but we're not getting any energy out of. Now we're going to take the energy from those plants and sell it to someone, make a small return on that investment, and it's going to take our rates down. I think his report said that that was going to result in about a $3.50 per kilowatt hour reduction on our bill. That's $3.50 a month in bulk power cost adjustment as we get into that contract. We're still a few months out on that, but we think also
That's if cost remains current?
Well, bulk power costs fluctuate, and we've been hanging in the about $82 per megawatt hour for the last 3 or 4 years. We kind of got as low as we're going to get unless we see someone start consuming the energy that our power plants are generating or capable of generating, and we sold a big block of that. The revenues we get for that is going to drive our average bill down from $82 megawatt hour into the $78, $79 megawatt hour. That gets passed straight through the customers.
Does it fluctuate, as the gas prices, I mean, gas is $2.29 a gallon now. Next month it might be $3.29 a gallon.
We are extremely exposed to gas, not gas at the gas pump, but natural gas prices. And we have been in part of that, seeing our rates levelize at $82 is because natural gas prices have been so low. We've been in I've seen it as low as the high $1, lower than $2 per million BTU. We've been floating in the threes, and the forecasts are it's going to stay in the threes. Every time we go $1 up in cost per thousand per million BTUs, it's an $8 increase per kilowatt hour for our customers. So the cost of our price of electricity is all about the cost of natural gas on the commodities market. So if it goes from 3 to 4, that 78 I just quoted you, it's going to be 86.
Right. So there's no real way of predicting what the cost is going to be in 3 years.
If you look if you look at the future forecast for natural gas,
right,
we're going to be level for 3 or 4 years unless we do something extraordinary like sell more gas. So 3 years ago, we didn't anticipate this contract we're having with Bartow. So we were expecting 82. It looks like we're going to come in at 78 or 79 for Newberry this year, which is good news for our customers. A year ago, Bill and I really championed a push with FMPA to change our rate structure. That resulted in about a 75-cent per month decrease for our customers, and that just came upon the realization there is no magic bullet in our electric rates. It is better. We're going after the 50 cents and the 75 cents a kilowatt hour or a megawatt hour, because if we can stack 6 or 7 of those, then we'll have a $5 per month reduction for customers.
So I don't understand, with all the savings and with our cost adjustment, how come we're going to be in the negative this year?
Well, because all of our bulk power costs are straight pass-throughs. So that's not going to be in the negative. It's the opposite. It's the other end of the spectrum where we sell energy and what's in our base rate. And we are going to be in the negative, but we're not going to be. I mean, we're going to capture 99% of our. Our expenses are within 1% of our revenues. So, and with an operation the size of ours, for us to, some years if we under project on our revenues, on our consumption, we'll make up that 1% and we'll break even. And I remember year before last, we made revenues in excess of our expenses, about $30,000. And Mayor Conrad spoke about we need to return that to our customers. This is returning that to our customers. We try to levelize our budget, and if we make $40,000 in profit one year and we lose $40,000 in profit the next year, it all kind of levels out. And all of this funding, this $41,000, would be coming out of our electric system retained earnings, our savings account, and and I would also mention that the savings account are how we do all of our expansion, how we do all of our CIP. Well, no, we do some of our CIP through depreciation funds, but we don't have development fees associated with the electric fund. But our retained earnings are in the $3 million range, and so it would take 20 years of $40,000 losses to not 20 years. We calculated it was in excess of 10 years of these types of losses for us to get into a panic situation. This is the margin of 1% is, to me, is nothing for it to be a red flag. We were willing to do that rather than try to come in and propose some sort of rate increase, because we think that next year, through a little bit of load growth, we would be fine and we wouldn't need that rate increase.
Any other questions from the commission on that item? Okay, move on.
In your water utility, we're again anticipating growth. We do have a small deficiency of revenues over expenditures. In your water and wastewater utility, your non-operating revenues are very much exceed any loss you might anticipate. So we will see an increase in our cash balances at the end of the year based on our current budget, but your actual operating revenues don't cover the operating expenses, but it's again about $6,000, and as the manager said, with load growth, we anticipate that that'll be caught up next year.
But this revenues over expenditure in water used to be much higher. We're getting
It used to have a
much
couple more
closer to
digits.
levelization. Yes.
Yes, sir.
I characterize a revenue over expenditure of $6,400 in water and wastewater as noise. Next year it'll come back and it'll be $6,400 to the positive. That's when we're dealing with the order of magnitude that we currently are. That's essentially a balanced budget. It previously was in the $60,000-$70,000 a year losses. That you're bleeding at that point. So we feel like that we're rate sufficient, but we tried to maintain that 1.5% increase and not try to go to 1.7% increase with the rate increase. It will, through load growth and through conservative modeling, probably won't realize a loss at all. We try to be conservative during the budgeting season.
In the water restricted revenues, your development fees, we anticipate collecting about $60,000, and we do anticipate using about $647,000 this year for a capital project, which is the State Road 26 water main extension. So we are using those development fees in the proposed budget. In the wastewater utility, it's a similar story. We have about $871,000 in revenues, $878,000 in expenses for $7,200.
Mayor.
Commissioner Martin.
Can we pause for a second and tell us where we are on that water expansion down 26?
Thank you for bringing that up. We have bids in, we have a contract ready to go, we have easements coming in, we have a contractor that is finishing up a job and said we'd be okay to take a pause. They still look to finish the water main in sufficient time not to be an issue for Destiny. We're monitoring Destiny's construction as well, and I will tell you that it's taken more effort than anticipated to get the easements, but they are coming in. It's taken, I spent the last month trying to satisfy an attorney for one of these property owners with the easement language, but today he sent me an email and says, we're good with it, we'll sign it and deliver it to you. So as soon as those things come in, we'll issue notice to proceed and get the contractor underway. I believe the construction period is 120 days.
Anybody have any other questions? All right.
Moving on to your wastewater restricted development fees, we anticipate collecting about $280,000. We have $170,000 in debt service payments. We'll use about $10,000 in capital projects, and then we'll end up banking $101,000 for future capital projects and expansion.
All right, let's pause real quick and just see if there's any questions about the funds before we get too far away from the public.
Bob Baker. I did
Welcome.
a brief question.
Little butt.
There we go. I know that in the past we have discussed the idea of having a substation, an additional substation in the city of Newberry, and there was a time, and I've lived here, for about 10 years, there was a time when our electric grid was very, very unstable. And I want to commend whatever the utility folks have done, that it has improved dramatically. I don't get the types of outages, brief as they were on a daily basis, that I used to. I don't know if that means we don't need a substation or if you're planning on building one. Obviously, I know that at the 4th budget workshop this year, you're not about to start building a substation. I understand that. But I was curious going forward where the commission was at on that, if there was a plan to add a second substation for Newberry.
It's an excellent question. Under our previous management, the substation was seen as the answer to that question. We got different set of opinions that came in, and not to say that we couldn't use a substation, but we had a consultant come in, and we hired a guy with a lot of utility background, and then we had some other hires as well. And so we've been able to address a lot of those concerns without spending the $3 million. I think was somewhere around $4 million for the substation. So I think the substation may still be out there at some point in time, but we've been able to address it through, and I would let Mr. Jones speak to that. It was a long list of things that we did to address those issues, but
It
they have
shows,
worked.
candidly.
I agree.
It definitely shows, and I appreciate the work that you've done on that. Thank you.
And I appreciate the question, because it does show that it's always worthwhile getting a second opinion, because we were on the verge of looking to spend that $4 million to fix that problem. And when you had some other people come in and speak to the issue, we were able to make strides for much, much cheaper.
And just in a nutshell, the substation gave us some connection to the Florida grid, gave us some redundancy, but it wasn't going to do anything for reliability other than if you lost your substation, which we rarely do. The biggest issue that we were hearing was it's all these momentary outages, and so those are distribution system fixes. This commission, I think, and frankly a previous commission, a lot of the distribution fixes started before I started working here. Blaine and Keith and those commissions started attacking those, and we are seeing the fruits of that. Our reliability numbers are up significantly in the last 2 years.
Go ahead, now.
Moving on to your other smaller enterprise funds, which are your mosquito and then primarily your other ISFs. In your mosquito control, just continuing on the way we've been the last 2 years. We don't propose a rate change.
And we're in the black.
And we're making a whole $700. In your
I get a lot of compliments and requests.
in your internal service fund for customer service, there's not a lot of change. There's an increase in personnel services due to an employee who's now taking benefits who previously wasn't. But there's not a lot of change there. Your internal service fund for utility administration, again, there's not much change. We are renting a building now, which helps offset the cost to the utilities.
Could we pause on that for a moment? There should have been an official announcement last
There
week.
should have, yes. Apologize.
That's on me.
That's on me. I don't know what we could have been thinking about recently.
But for the commission to know and the public to know that the utility office that Blaine was in and then Jamie was in that had the leaks and we had mold issues. When Jamie moved out and we attacked the mold issues, it just became that where Jamie was working better for Jamie. And so we had a building and we didn't have a firm plan, and we got an opportunity to do a short-term rental. It's a 1-year rental. But over the period of that year, we think we'll get about $5,500 in revenues, more or less, and that will help us recover some of the cost and bring in the building back from the mold contaminated. We had to pull carpet out, we had to pull the ceiling tiles out, we had to re-roof it, and the city made an investment in that, and I thought that it would be a good opportunity to recover the bulk of it. It doesn't recover 100% of it, rather than leave the building vacant. Let's go ahead and do that, and over the period of the rental period, we can determine if we want to continue renting it or do something different with the facility.
It looks great.
It does, and you know that the Newberry Dance, did I get that right? Newberry Dance Studio, Newberry Dance and Arts Studio.
That's correct.
Dance lessons for kids, music lessons for kids. It's low impact. It's a great location next to the Firehouse Gallery, so we have a burgeoning cultural center in downtown. So
It's cultural district. It's our cultural district.
if you're looking for a place for your children to learn some violin or guitar or some dance steps, that's great.
About 30
Commissioner Flanders.
some years ago, it was a dance studio. That's interesting. That's good.
Come full circle. And I know the owner of that is looking for this one year to be a startup that will lead to growth. She's looking for a larger space in the future, but she wants to test the waters first. So wonderful chance to recoup some of those costs and help a burgeoning young business.
And we didn't tout it as revenue diversification, but this commission has expressed an interest in revenue diversification, so we will characterize that rental as revenue diversification.
His evaluation's next month, so.
Stretching.
The last fund is the Vehicle Replacement Fund, which I've lovingly named VERF. In VERF, we're getting our lease payments from the general fund. We have a transfer into that seed money we discussed earlier, and then we'll be buying some vehicles. And that brings us to the last slide, which is, again, the budget timeline. Just remind the commission that the 2 regularly scheduled commission meetings in September are your budget hearings. As you all know or remember, the budget hearings are very fun. There's about 2 pages of agenda items we go through, and then we will officially adopt proposed budgets, and then we'll advertise the trim, and then we'll officially adopt the budget at the second meeting, and then start the new budget year.
Wrap-up comments from me, and we certainly welcome any comments or questions. This budget year has been more of a roller coaster than most because of the county property appraiser coming in with reduced property values and dealing with expectations of increasing in large components of our general fund budget. We ended up with a rollback rate that was almost 6.2 mils. We have this aversion to a millage rate that's anything 6 point anything. It at least does not sit well with staff. After we worked on some of those property values issues and we negotiated law enforcement, it looked like as early as this week, it would take about 6.024 to keep ourselves whole. It wasn't a big jump to get below 6. With the millage rate, it cut $10,000 or $15,000 out of the budget for us to do that. So we're a little bit shy of whole according to this year's budget, but from a project loading perspective, we got plenty to keep us busy, probably as much as we could administer anyway.
Well, I want to compliment staff once again. I mean, the presentation is concise. I think it's easy to understand and follow, and your ability to keep us under 6 and give the residents what they clearly said the other night that they wanted, in that service. So, what do you need from the commission tonight? Are you looking for a head nod, or is this is the way we want to go? I do want to, while the commission's looking at the paperwork, I want to commend some citizens in the audience. We generally get people to come and tell us when they want a service, but then they don't come back when it comes to the budget time. So I appreciate the citizens who have come, and certainly not putting words in their mouth, but I'm assuming they're here because we said, hey, if you want a service, we need to pay for the service, and we'd certainly love to have your voice here when it comes to budget time, because other groups of folks will be here with their voice. So I just do want to commend the residents who did took another night on a busy week to spend here with us to show that support. So with that, is there a commissioner that would like to deliberate? Any questions, comments, concerns? We are sub 6, and we pretty much have a carryover budget from last year with our CIP, with the programs that we've been able to put in place. Frankly, I can't imagine a better outcome, a better end to these conversations. It's a pleasant surprise. I thought we were coming in to be an over 6, and we were going to have some hard conversations, and and staff has once again, through the mathematical wizardry of Dallas, kept us sub 6. Commissioner Martin.
Booklet 2, page 4, law enforcement. With the contract being the 777, why are we programming in 787? What's the $10,000 difference?
Busted. Actually, and as soon as you said law enforcement, if you on the list we had a project, and we've talked about it through all of our budget sessions, that we're going to do a facilities master plan for City Hall for this area, this complex. And in our previous budget sessions, we had kind of gotten a head nod to move ahead with that. At the last City Commission meeting, though, there was much talk both from the audience and the Commission about developing a long-term strategic plan for law enforcement. So we, staff, added that to our list of programs. We call it the Law Enforcement Strategic Plan. We funded it at $10,000 this year, which is why is showing up in that rolled-up budget as $787,000 instead of $777,000, which is the sheriff's contract. So we added that project. We removed the facilities master plan and felt like that, this commission has done one of those kind of special projects every year for the last 4 or 5 years, and feel like from a timing perspective we can push that project back for a year, and we can talk about it next year if the commission would like to fund it. But we thought that this year it would be better to take a hard look at law enforcement. I don't think that it is a purely staff-driven or even a ad hoc committee-driven thing. I think we're going to need to hire some consulting expertise to help us do some of the research and guide us along the way.
Jason said he'd do it for free.
Commissioner Martin.
That's Jason said he'd do it for free.
I love Jason, but there's an old saying about you get what you pay for.
Yeah, that's what we thought about when we hired you.
Commissioner Coleman.
I guess it's my pet project, and it's in here. That's great. City Hall marquee sign, finally, after 4 years. Yes. I think there's going to be a lot of citizens happy that this is going in.
I get requests for that quite often as well.
Yeah.
Commissioner.
Big LED.
It's blinking pink and purple letters that go.
Blue and gold.
It's
going to be interesting. We're in the historic district, and we have some sign restrictions in the historic district. We have a building that has the fieldstone look. So our thoughts are it's going to be in keeping with the City Hall look and feel. It's not going to be gaudy. There's going to be some fieldstone involved, but it's also going to be able to display messages to say we have a budget workshop tonight. It begins at 6. Be here early to get a seat, or a planning and zoning board over a very non-controversial issue, and take your time about getting here.
Well, we'll get some experience rebuilding the fountain with that fieldstone, and before we move on to I applaud the staff, one, hearing the commission and hearing the residents about the study for law enforcement. I think it is absolutely. That was the message, and we got 3 years of quiet and stability in front of us on that front. And I, for one, am frustrated with people bandering numbers about of what it would take and what it would look like. And everybody's an expert when we're just throwing things around. So I think it's a great idea. We can't make a good decision without good data in front of us. And that's what this is going to be. And this will help us know if we're making a good decision and how to move forward. And I agree that we got to start now, because 3 years sounds like a long time, but when you're dealing with something like this, you need a year and a half to execute. So you've got to start now to figure out the direction that you want to potentially go if you want to go in a different direction. We may do a study and find out that we got a good direction right where we're at, and we're not anywhere near going in a different direction. We just simply don't know until we get some real numbers from some objective folks that have experience in this and can tell us, give us some guidance. So I think that's a good move, and I think that you heard from the commission and you heard from the folks. Let's stop with the, I think this is what it would be and what it would cost, and let's figure out the true answers. Commissioner Farnsworth.
Can you tell me where our millage rate was last year?
5.9089.
Is there any way to reduce our millage rate back down to that point, so there's not an increase?
If there are projects reduced from the budget, we can reduce the millage.
What's the, I'm going to quiz you on math here because it's been a long couple of days, but 5.999 and it was 5.90.
89.
So is that 0.8?
0.091.
0.091 difference. 0.09. That's why we had that earlier. 0.0.
30,000.
0.091.
Yeah,
I don't do fractions that small, so it's
It would result in $30,000 worth of scaling back on mostly this list.
Does any other commissioner have any interest in going through this budget and trying to find $30,000 to hit that? Again, that's not the rollback number from last year. That's just this actual number that it was last year, but it's not the rollback number from last year. This is still under
Rollback number was 6.2.
6.2. So this is still under the rollback number from last year. Commissioner Glanzer?
I was under the impression that because of the vote we had on Monday to have the ASO, and it was $770,000 that we were going to have to raise taxes over 6 mills. So I'm like shocked tonight to see it at 5.999. I'm okay with that. 0.091 in this size of a budget, $6 million, 30,000 is, I think it's impressive, and so I don't like to raise taxes either, but for what we got for it, and I think these people showed up, they were willing to do that, and that's why they're here, and I think we need to appreciate that and listen to them. So that's my opinion.
Commissioner Coleman?
I feel the same way as,
Don't lose your sign out there now.
no, I'm not. I feel the same way as Commissioner Glanzer. I mean, I was going to come in here after voting for High Springs and see, I told you so kind of deal, but I got to commend staff. I'm impressed. I have nothing to argue about right here.
Man, it's 7 o'clock and nothing to argue about. It's like a hallelujah song to my ears right now. I got yelled at for 5 minutes yesterday. I don't even know what it was about. It was something about an owl, or there was a little speaker involved. I'm not sure what it was, but it was. Yeah, but it's so nice and peaceful in here tonight. I appreciate it. Any other commissioners want to speak to the 5.99, or is the majority of the commission here pleased and happy with the work that staff has done and ready to proceed? I'm seeing some head nods.
Because, on this, I understand where Commissioner Farnsworth is at, but I'm looking down this list of things here, and some of them like, dang, there is some A's that we're not. What is that one? There, LRH, critical repairs, phase 2, bricks. brick walls and chimneys in Chimney. And that's the Little Red Schoolhouse. And man, we've been on the board, almost 4 years now. And we've been dealing with that since day one, since us three's got on the commission. I'm kind of worried about that, but go ahead.
Commissioner McGehee.
Well, I mean, if you look though, you've got phase one that is, the structural repairs, I believe, are the most important thing right now. Kind of where we're at with this budget. I mean, the brick walls, would that be the repointing of the bricks, or is that more of a cosmetic?
That is the repointing of the bricks, and the cricket on the ceiling. The structural repairs, which are some pier issues that we've discovered under the building, and frankly, that was, going into earlier today, that was down much lower. We found some additional revenues and realized that we were shorting that project. We were going to be squeezing it real tight, and so we funded it up to $45,000.
Now that does include the upstairs where we've got the sag on the.
The piers will support that. The
Okay,
general
so
plan
that's
for
the
Little Red
piers.
Schoolhouse is we're going to move the weight downstairs.
Yeah.
We're going to move the museum upstairs. And but when we move the weight downstairs, there are still some support walls that we need to build
Okay.
beneath our foundation piers, and that's what this is going to go to.
Okay. All right. Yeah, because that was my main concern.
Commissioner Coleman.
And, $10,000 for the police study. I think we need to stay where we're at. That's where I'm gonna be.
Commissioner Farnsworth.
I was just curious about the parental leave, 3,200.
Commissioner Coleman got his sign.
It took him 4 years.
As we reported when we did the paid parental leave at our last, when it was considered and it was tabled, that that in most instances there's not a true cost with it, because it's more of a missed opportunity cost. So, but we did calculate that the actual that if you just calculate the missed opportunity cost, or it's a cost if you have to replace that position. So there's certain critical positions that if someone's out, you have to pay to replace it. So the best of our ability to calculate it, it was in the $3,000 range, and we thought it would happen 0.67 times annually. So 2 out of 3 years we would have this event. There is sufficient funding in this budget to cover one of those events should the commission elect to adopt that policy.
Do we have money in place to cover any long-term leave for any other things?
Yes, I mean, Dallas May can speak more clearly or more specifically to that, but Dallas generally includes in our personnel budgets contingency funding for unexpected things like a payout, a retirement that results in a pretty heavy payout. We don't calculate worst case scenario 100% of our employees taking a payout, but there's always funding available in case a long-term seasoned employee retires and takes a lump sum payout of say $20,000–$25,000.
Okay.
Is there anything to expand on?
Is that separated out, or is just this one separated out?
The funding for those items, because they've always happened, are continuation, and also because they're currently required. The commission's adopted policies on that. We consider that as a continuation budget, so it's not on the list. To us, we didn't consider it as an option for the commission to consider. Obviously, it is, but that's just always in the budget, so it's not on the list as a reoccurring item.
Do we give any money to people that are out due to taking care of their parents or having to be out long-term for taking care of their child or something of that nature?
Currently, an employee could file for FMLA which guarantees them their position but not pay.
Right.
And then the employee would be eligible in that situation to use their sick leave, any sick leave that they have accrued, or vacation leave if they had any.
But the person with the parental leave don't have to use their sick leave.
They're not required to, but if you're on FMLA, you don't get compensated. It protects your job, but it doesn't guarantee your paycheck. The city offers sick leave that does provide compensation, and then we have some insurance policies. We have a long-term disability policy for each employee, is that correct? So if you're disabled, after 90 days that kicks in, and we offer short-term disability as optional coverage, but that's employee paid for.
I'm not talking about disability, I'm saying like somebody has to be out for their parent is in the dying process, they need to be out a month or 2 months, but we don't compensate them for that time out.
Only through their sick leave.
Yeah, for any accrued time, they would possibly be eligible to request a transfer and have other employees donate to them. But at this time, if they don't have any leave, there'd be none. In that situation, again, as the manager said, depending on the position, we would be required, or we might have to fill the position with a temporary person.
I just don't see the fairness between the two. I mean, was it right that?
I don't think staff can speak to fairness issues. They can just speak to how much it would cost.
I'm making a statement.
Yeah, okay. I thought you were asking them to
No.
level
Okay,
in
no.
on fairness. Didn't think that was fair.
Anyhow, I'll just make a statement that I don't see how it's fair that a person that has to be out of work on FMLA for whatever period of time, not get compensated by the city, yet a lady or a guy that has a child get monies from the city while they're out. I don't understand why there's a discrepancy there.
Is that the conclusion of the statement?
That's my statement.
Okay. Commissioner Glanzer?
I don't see it as a conflict. To me, one of our big issues is economic development, and one of the big things is how can we attract people here to work here that are of a high caliber. And I don't know for $3,000 where else you can get the value we're going to get from this benefit. It's literally a drop in the bucket, and I think if nothing else, it's going to be one more little perk that somebody might consider if they're choosing our city over another city for a job. So if you want to look at it in the economic development column, I think it's a huge benefit. It's not just some fluff that we're giving free so somebody can have a baby and get paid for it. I think you can look at it as a true piece of the pie that we can offer to potential employees coming to our city. So if we can look at it as a benefit of economic development, that's a fair price to pay. And some years we won't even have to pay it. So I don't think it's unfair at all.
Any other commissioners want to weigh in on this?
I
Commissioner Martin, and then
have one thing to say. It's also could be considered economic development if we had that we will pay you for your FMLA if you have to take it. I mean, that goes both ways. It's not just because you're having a child.
okay, Commissioner Martin, and then Commissioner Coleman.
Packet number 2, page 4 again.
Are you taking us away from the?
Yes.
Can Commissioner Coleman have the mic? Because I think he was going to speak to that issue before we get too far away.
I was just, I know at the property appraiser's office, we build up so much sick time, and we bank it, and then when something, so you can donate to the bank, and it really, of course, we have 3 people that always advise of the employees if it's really practical for this person to get it, and that's worked out really well. I was just throwing a suggestion out there.
Before we have that program.
We had that policy. Mr. Mayor, we had a policy similar to that prior to the current personnel policy. It was not a very popular program amongst employees, so we discontinued that policy in favor of our sick leave donation policy.
So before we get too far away from this one, can we hear from any audience members who'd like to speak to their support of creating a maternity leave program in the city of Marion? Anybody want to speak to that? Come on down, ma'am.
Good evening. Gail Watson here. Don't the family medical leave, the law dictates how that is supposed to be used. So I can't see how we could, bring in something different than what the law requires.
Mr. Manager, you want to speak to that? Or?
Mr. Mayor, FMLA dictates the bare minimum that you must do. The law always allows for you to do above and beyond the bare minimum.
And the bare minimum is you have to give the woman 2 weeks or 2.
Anybody
12.
who qualifies for a qualifying event gets 12 weeks of leave.
Of unpaid leave,
which
and you can't
guarantees
fire
their
them.
job.
Okay.
Correct.
Anybody else want to speak to this issue? I think we got to give. All right, commissioners want to give a head nod to staff about whether this stays in or out, or
Whether what stays in or out.
Parental leave.
parental leave.
The 3,200.
I want to say one more thing about
Yes,
that.
Commissioner Glanzer.
I just think it's unfair, and it would make another employee feel, I think, bad if they didn't want to give up their vacation leave because somebody got pregnant and that person couldn't leave their job if they didn't have somebody else donate to them. Again, it's more of a, and that's not something you could put on your list of benefits for employees, people that are applying for jobs. You can't say, well, somebody might give you some, hours if you have, if you need parental leave. This is really something you can put out there that this is what we offer, and it's a very small amount of money. That's how I'm looking at it, just a really trivial amount of money.
We were 2-2 on this before. I think Commissioner Martin was absent.
Oh, fantastic.
And
Well, someone could have changed their mind also.
Is there I'm kind of indifferent. I think there's pluses and minuses of both of it. Can it not just be classified as either one, whether you want to use it for birth or death?
I think Dallas tells me that the type of policy that Commissioner Farnsworth is speaking to is referred to as a compassion policy, or compassion leave. Which,
I don't really care what we call it, but
well, we don't explicitly know all the details because we want to make sure that you kind of get it right and that you don't get overly broad or overly narrow on that, but we could research that. It's been our intent to bring the paid parental leave policy back to the board for consideration at the last meeting in September, and so that would give us a couple weeks to consider that and discuss that during that commission meeting as a consideration as well.
I would like.
Let me
Hang on a
Either
second.
or both.
Let me finish.
I'm sorry.
If we can just have the theme of it just be a life-changing event, that could be something positive or negative, and just go from there. We're kind of a little bit more of a catch-all for whatever. To me, something like that gives a little bit more power to the employee to classify however they want to interpret that as their life-changing event, because then you don't really get into probably the weeds of what it actually is. It may work
Staff would
beneficially.
Staff would be happy to do a little more investigation and report on it at the last meeting in September. Kind of bring back what we know. I think the main thing we'd like to do is make sure that we can quantify or qualify what constitutes a life-changing event, whether it's parental leave or a compassion leave. We can get it properly qualified so that we can administer it properly. But we'd be happy to try to pull that together.
Can we have Commissioner
It's an
Coleman, and
excellent
then
idea.
we'll let our citizen have a comment?
I was against this when I first seen it, and I really struggled and actually sat down with my wife on this one that night. And she brought back the times that we had our kids, and she didn't get paid. She worked at the bank and the same thing. And if I was a businessman, I would want my employee not to be stressed over money. And she hit home with that. So, and then seeing what it's really costing the city, I'm 100% behind this. Yeah,
Okay,
and with that, if none of the mothers have a child or whatever, no life-changing event, it's banked and then it will build, I'm definitely behind this.
That was the question. How many days of medical leave does each employee get? It probably has to do with how long they've been employed.
Every full-time employee accrues 8 hours. So not
Eight-
quite a full day every month, but it's 96 hours a year.
Each month, 96 hours. And can that be carried over for year to year?
Yes, it's
Because-
capped at close
because
to 1,000.
in our family, we had a situation where my job, we didn't have any sick leave. There was none. But my sister did, and she didn't just take days off using her sick leave. She accumulated it. In fact, when she retired, she got to retire a year early. But we had a situation in the family where we had a terrific accident, and this person needed a lot of extra attention. So she used her sick leave that had been accrued and went to North Carolina to help and was there for more than a month and got paid. So if an employee uses this time prudently, there's always that block of time where they can use it for whatever kind of family emergency there might be.
Okay, I've got 3 commissioners who have expressed interest in moving forward with the policies, and in the interest of another commissioner ready to move on to another item.
Just want one
Is
quick
there,
thing.
Commissioner
I
Glanzer,
really,
go right
really
ahead.
want to say this. I think it'd be a slippery slope. I worry about life-changing event. I mean, I think if we look at it every year, we all have something that we could say this is life-changing. We're trying to keep the budget at a certain place, and parental leave is what it is. If we want to start talking about end of life, well, end of life could be a year long. I hate to say this, you don't know when the end of life is coming. You know when a child's going to be, 8 weeks old. So, I would like to limit it at this time, to this. Maybe we can look towards compassionate leave as a different category at some time in the future. But with this tight budget we have, and, like I said, a life-changing event could be a wide range of things that we have to be careful about,
Well, I think we've got 3 head nods to leaving the funding in, and we can discuss the policy and the name of it and those kinds of things. We'll have to discuss the policy of it later, and that will probably be a little bit longer of a conversation. So we can all think about all of the pitfalls of trying to expand it or narrow it or those kinds of things as we go forward. But Commissioner Martin, you had another item in the budget that you'd like to discuss, or?
Packet 2, page 4, under code enforcement, what were the operating expenses that we anticipated going up?
Mr. Mayor, the largest portion of that increase is $2,800 for the lease for a new vehicle. That's part of that vehicle replacement fund. So that's $2,800 of it. The rest are some incidental increases. The next largest is for fuel cost and then the special magistrate.
That was a pretty quick response. You know this thing backwards and forwards, don't you?
Commissioner Glanzer?
So we are getting a special magistrate, so we'll be able to enforce the code?
We have an RFP out for special magistrates. I believe the bids are due in a week or so.
I think the commission and I would also like an update on that as soon as we have that in place, and I'd like to see the progression of that. So maybe we can get Connie back in front of us when we have something substantive to present. Mr. Martin?
Page 5, $810 on facilities.
In personnel services, the increase would be due to just merit increases, changes in fringe, and then restructuring of departments.
I'm just testing you.
We have 1,500 accounts. I'm ready.
What is account 1417? They said 1,500 accounts.
Except
Nah, that's okay. That's all right. Are you done, Commissioner Martin? You got one more. Okay. Are we ready to maybe open up to any of the public who wants to talk about any of the millage rates, any things you've heard tonight, suggestions? Come on down if you would like. Introduce yourself. We took away the little green light, but that'll be me.
Are you afraid? I'm going to drag it on for a few hours till 3? No, I'm not going to. Actually, it's very good tonight. I've been coming to these for years.
Yes, you
and
have.
usually I come and I'm adamant or passionate about some particular subject. Looked at it tonight, went through all the packets. Excellent job. I have no comment. Very good.
Yeah, I tell you. Wow. I'm
Just gonna float
Yeah.
on back here now.
That's right. Welcome, sir.
Chris Monk, I'm a taxpaying resident here in Newberry, so Mayor and Commissioners. The other night I was here for the public safety, and I wanted to come and make sure that I told you that I am very much in favor of the increase of the millage rate. Even if the millage rate went above the 6, I appreciate you being able to keep it to 5.9999. That's great, but the fact is still, even with the millage rate increase, as a resident, we're still saving money, especially for the $65 that we're going to be getting back in the
Solid
solid
waste.
waste. So even if you went higher, in which it's over, I'm still going to be extremely pleased with the fact I'm still to the good. And even if it was a $30 increase instead of just this $10 increase, I'm very pleased and very happy, and I would be very much in favor of getting up here again and, speaking out in reference to this. I'm just like everybody else. I want to save money. I want to put that extra dollar in my pocket for my family, for me, for, vacation or anything else. But public safety is a very big concern, and I appreciate y'all going forward with that. And I'm in favor of this millage rate increase.
Thank you, sir.
Run and tell all your friends. Let everybody.
I will.
Tell them that Rick Coleman was wrong.
pay it forward.
Thank you, sir. Any other residents wishing to speak? Okay, well, does the commission have any last item that you wish to deliberate on that you want to question? You ready? I tell you, these guys, they love me so much. Okay, well, come on down, sir.
Rick Lee. As everyone knows, we've had a lot of tragedy in Texas. And it's kind of hard because we don't know what we can do here. The Lions Club is having a yard sale this weekend. They're accepting donations, and 100% of the proceeds are going to Hurricane Harvey. So Lions International administers that and does a real good job.
So come to the garage sale and buy something.
That's right.
And buy a hot dog at least,
Yeah,
right?
And,
Buy a
and
hot
donate if you've got things that you want to
Absolutely.
clean out of your closet or your garage. Thank you.
Okay, so do we just need a head nod tonight? We don't need a motion? And I think you've received that. Seems like the commission is very pleased with you. They're pleased with your work. I would add my pleasure to that presentation that we've had tonight. I appreciate the folks coming out tonight and supporting both sides of the process. That's very pleasing. It makes this job a whole lot easier. So I appreciate you guys coming out and dedicating your time. I'll open it to any last final comments.
Y'all go get some sleep.
Commissioner
You'll
Cole.
have to come tomorrow night.
Buchholz is playing Vanguard tomorrow night at 7. My son,
I need it.
and my son was defensive player of the week, and it's
Congratulations.
really worth going and watch him play.
Yeah. Wonderful closing comment. All right, hearing no else, adjourned.